Well, it's that time for the newspaper review. That's why Aaron's here, isn't it, Aaron? Yeah.
I've joined the big table. I have indeed.
Let's have a look through some of them. Like most papers, the Wall Street Journal leads with the British Prime Minister David Cameron's comments about the downed Russian plane. He says that based on intelligence reports, it was, quote, more likely than not to have been caused by a terrorist bomb.
Well, the Financial Times, it reports that the Bank of England is forecasting there won't be a rise in interest rates anytime soon. Yep, we heard it yesterday. The bank's governor, Mark Carney, said the outlook for global growth had weakened and he was trying to avert a slowdown in the UK's economy.
The potential economic benefits of the migrant crisis are highlighted in the International New York Times. They say that the predicted influx of 3 million migrants over the next 3 years could prove a net gain of 0.25% to the European economy by 2017.
Really? The convictions in the US of 2 former British traders found guilty of the LIBOR rigging. That's covered in The Guardian. It says that they're likely to face lengthy sentences for rate fixing, but will probably appeal.
And the China Daily reports that the China National Nuclear Corp is poised to close a $6 billion deal to build a nuclear power plant in Argentina.
Another one. And the Daily Telegraph says that London's Victoria and Albert Museum is in talks to hold an exhibition of the handbags and the dresses of the former British Prime Minister, Lady Thatcher.
Well, joining us is David Carter, author and business mentor.
Hey, David. Morning.
Good morning. Very warm welcome. So let's begin. Obviously, on many of the front pages, the UK suspicions that this was caused by a bomb. It's interesting, isn't it, that you've got these people stranded there. There's that issue for them. Being brought back, but not with their luggage. There's obviously still concern, isn't there?
I think that 20,000 British people in Egypt, where a plane has blown up flying back to St. Petersburg, the Prime Minister's done exactly the right thing to look after the safety of those people. And quite frankly, their insurance company or someone can deal with the cost of their luggage arriving separately or not at all. The most important thing is to get them home safely.
But and this particular article here it suspects terrorism. I mean, this all stems from the British government getting a sniff of something. Probably, well, there are some reports suggest that the US had some information. The UK, pass it on to the UK. I mean, they got a sniff of something, right, to go to this sort of level, to these extremes.
Well, I think we should compare and contrast this with weapons of mass destruction. If we've now got some intelligence that there was a bomb on the plane from reliable sources, David Cameron would not act, foolishly, given that the Prime Minister from Egypt is on his way here or arrived here today. He's put the lives of 20,000 British people at the top of his priority list and acted accordingly. And, whether Mr. Putin is annoyed, at the claims in his country of retaliation against his actions a few weeks ago is irrelevant. We've got to look after the 20,000 British people and get them home safely as quickly as possible. Okay. And the impact on the Egyptian economy isn't a priority compared to the lives of those 20,000 people.
Right. Sure. Yep. Let's quickly move on. Let's talk about the Financial Times, because here you go. You've got two very different paths, it seems like it, right? I've just been talking about, on my program, Janet Yellen, the US Fed. Very likely now, it appears. Very likely. And some saying they probably should have done it in September. But rate rise by a little pinch, by just 1/4%, going up in the US. But we heard from Mark Carney yesterday, the boss of the Bank of England, that we could be looking at, to 2017 before we get a rate rise here. What's the difference?
Well, I think that we've lived with low interest rates for such a long time now that even the idea of a 0.5% rise sounds like a lot. But, I can remember many years ago paying 17%, interest rate on my mortgage. And I remember at the time we couldn't afford to pay the mortgage, but we couldn't afford to move because the house prices had dropped 30%. So, 0% interest rates and a 0.5% rise is really money for nothing, But the problem, I think, is that the global economy is shifting. China's cutting interest rates. The ECB have decided to do more quantitative easing. And the concern is about domestic consumer credit, which has grown by 8%. And so I think there's big tectonic plate shifts in the global economy. pressure on consumer debt in the UK.
But Mark Carney's not looking at a different story, a different picture that you just rattled off that Janet Yellen is looking at. They're looking at the same picture. So why the US poised to do it? And we're back off. Just two different opinions from
but
two different
whether
central...
they do it or whether they don't do it, it remains to be seen. So saying, forward guidance a few weeks ago, Mark Carney thought he would do.
Yeah.
And now he said the data's changed and...
But that's the other issue as well, isn't it? Some people may have taken action based on what he said before, maybe remortgaged, anticipating this possible rise. They now perhaps feeling a little sore.
Do you think, I'm going to put you on the spot, do you think the US will hike rates in December or not?
I don't think they will, actually.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
I don't think they will, because I think there's a number of major global shifts going on that the US will have to take account of. In Brazil, in China, in Europe, QE.
Okay.
Let's turn to the international New York Times, if we can. The potential economic benefits of the migrant crisis being highlighted there by the European Commission. Do you think they're just trying to take some of the heat out of the situation?
Yes, it's complete political wishful thinking and spurious economic analysis. I like the comment from an analyst at one of the banks who said there is a big portion of wishful thinking underlying the forecast and the downside risks should not be underestimated. I think the point is that whether it's the 19 countries in the Euro or the 28 countries in the community, there are quite a large number of countries, Romania and Hungary in particular, who have said, whether it costs us money, we don't want an influx of people who don't fit into our culture. And the cost and consequence of that influx into our culture is more than financial. Yeah. And we don't want it. And they have every right. And of course, here the tension with ever closer union in the EE is what's really at stake here. So I think the politicians are trying to justify the fact that 1 million people this year, 1.5 million next year are going to arrive in Europe from parts of the world that are culturally very different and trying to justify that economically. It's the same a few weeks ago when Lord Rose said that the benefits of staying in the EU for Britain were £451 per person per year. Well, a lot of people might be happy to pay £450 a year.
You can keep your 400 quid. We're out. Hey, look, we've got to quickly move on. Yeah. Let's. What are we talking about? What paper is this?
This one.
It's The Guardian. It's The Guardian. Look, this is so. 2 British bankers could be facing jail time for their role in Labour. What are you chuckling at? Why that?
I think we've run out of banks to find, so now we've got to find the bankers. And I think it's really interesting that actually over the last 4 or 5 years, all of the fines have all been paid by the banks.
Yeah.
And which comes out of shareholders' funds. But actually the individuals at the banks who were responsible for these decisions have never really been held to account. And I think it was, only a month ago that Tom Hayes at Union Bank of Switzerland was actually jailed in the UK, the first one, and now the first 2 are being lined up in the US.
Is this then, so the chap just, last month, and these 2, is this the start, do you think? We'll see more?
I don't know, but I think that until the people's behaviour changes, nothing will change. And so I think what in the US and in the UK people are trying to make sure is that the message is loud and clear that this kind of behaviour is unacceptable, and the banks have been heavily fined, and now they're going to go after some of the bankers.
Okay. Should we quickly just squeeze in about 20 seconds, the Chinese having a bit of a love affair with nuclear plants around the world at the moment.
Energy providers to the world.
Yes. I think what's fascinating about the world, say energy providers to the world, they've recently come to the UK and now to Argentina, so that's 2 countries, and that's not the entire world.
Well,
but
it's a start there. It's a start there, David.
but I think the interesting thing for me is, given the economic turbulence in China at the moment and the big fears about the sort of meltdown and changes in their economy, where's the money coming from that they are investing in all of these significant multi-billion projects around the world? And is this part of a longer-term strategic intention of China that has nothing to do with economics.
David, in a word, this thing about Thatcher's clothing exhibition, of historic significance or not? Should the V&A display it? What do you think?
You've got
Yes,
5
10
seconds. You've got
Of course they should. Maggie's handbags.
Maggie's hammer. You go and see it, right? Yeah.
David, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Good on you, David. Cheers. That's it.
From us for the moment. We'll have more headlines for you shortly.